Hello, everyone. Welcome to Big Ideas Podcast, the podcast where three co hosts rotate roles to explore real conversations, meaningful ideas, and the decisions that shape our lives. I'm Justin Gabassi. I'm a human optimization coach, a professional touring musician, and current world traveler studying how health, culture, and human connection intersect across different societies.
And I am Mark Steiner, father, partner, mate, an entrepreneur, an actor, an artist, and creator. I'm co founder and CEO of Gig Salad.
And I'm Jessica Broadway, coach, author, speaker, mom, and wife. And I specialize in working with people who are navigating seasons of change.
All right. Well, it's good to see you two today. I'm excited for another episode 17, by the way. This is fun. So today is going to be pretty exciting. Today is about AI. And real issue is no longer kind of should we use it? The issue is how do we use it without outsourcing judgment, identity, creativity, and parenting. So this will be fun. Before we get started, we have a tradition where we like to share each other's POV, point of view. Where are we all at in the world? Mark, let's start with you today, man.
I'm at my Gig Salad office, my office downtown, Springfield, Mo. And it's a cloudy day. We're supposed to get some rain, but I'm cheery. I'm alive and well, and I'm ready to rock and roll and talk about technology and AI.
Nice, Jessica. Where are you chiming in from today?
Chiming in from my home studio in Nixa, Missouri. And I'm excited to kind of bring that mom perspective today and how it's shaping, our kids' childhood. Really, it's a huge piece that's kind of woven its way in now. So I'm excited to dive into this topic and talk about what's good and what's bad and what we need to be aware of.
Yeah, and your perspective is really interesting as well because you can speak to however much you do or don't want to share, but you're heavily involved with the school system. You've been way up the food chain with the PTA, and now you've taken on a new position, which you can share or not. But you definitely you've been in the trenches with some of this stuff for sure. So I'm excited to get your perspective as well, since you're heading up a lot of what's happening in schools right now. So, well, I am in Thailand still. I love it. I mean, I'm happy to still be here. So I feel blessed. So I'm still cruising around, checking out this really wonderful place. So that's where I'm at.
Didn't you just do a border run? Did you do the border run yet?
I don't know if we can talk about that. No, I think I think we can. I think it's common knowledge that this happens, but I haven't done it yet. But the bottom line is for the listeners, and this is kind of with anyone that's traveling here and sometimes other countries. You have to go through a visa extension process and you have to follow what your visa allows you to, how much time you get to spend in each country. And then there's different ways to sort of reset the timer. And some people do what's called, or are doing, I think it's legal, what's called a border run. Basically, you leave the country and you come back. And there's these laws and rules change a bit on how long you have to be gone and when you can come back and things like that. And it varies country to country. So in fact, Thailand's about to change the legislation on this as well. So it's a touch and go thing. It's cool. You just have to be up to speed on what you're doing. So yeah, thanks for asking. Let's dive into this thing. I think it'd be nice to set the stage a bit just so people kind of remember or if they didn't know when this whole AI thing like really hit, right? Like when it kind of came alive, so to speak, when it was introduced. And so ChatGPT came online November 30 of 2022. So it's really only been mainstream for about 2 to 3 years. And I thought it might be cool for each of us to just speak really quick to how each of us have engaged or the level of exposure. In doing a little research, it seems that right now the vast majority of the population are using it kind of still more like a glorified search engine, And then there's other people that are going super, super deep dive on it. So I don't know. Mark, I don't know how much you want to get into this, but you mentioned you're in the background working on some things with AI, maybe some significant things, but what's been your exposure so far, man?
Yeah, for me, I'm so in 22, I would have been 50. Let me do the math here real quick. Around 56. Was it that long ago? Holy cow! That goes to show you, I was not really aware. I wasn't thinking about AI. And that's really embarrassing for a guy who's the CEO of a technology company.
Mm-hmm.
So, was that a My gosh, Jessica. But yeah, so there's that. And I feel like I'm kind of older, even at 56. So I have had a very casual relationship with technology. I have been very fortunate that I have around me some of the most brilliant minds in the world, I think. I really do have. My business partner, Gig Salad, is a genius. And when it comes to technology and developing and coding and programming and just being very much aware of in a very intimate way of everything that's going on as far as this goes. And then I have other and then the whole development team is just really smart. Our product developer. So they keep me in check. I have been aware of and dabbled with using AI on a personal level, but I very much have encouraged the team at Gig Salad to be spending time with some AI platform every day. I want everybody on my team to have some knowledge of it, be asking themselves, how can this apply to the job that they do? Beyond that, how can we be thinking about how we apply AI to the Gig Salad platform for our users? And then lastly, I'm jumping into the deep end with a friend, and I'm going to try to develop a company. I'm going to try to develop a startup entirely using AI. So designing an app, website, and we'll see how it goes. So I'll keep you posted. But I think I'm going to be neutral in a lot of the regards here between on opinions. I'm going to be the referee between you two. I think is how this is going to go down. I don't know. Woo! It's going to get spicy, folks. Stick around.
You're using it or at least exposed to it in some capacity each day, but
I
your team is doing the deep dive, and then you're about to do a really deep dive. It sounds.
Yeah, I'm trying to learn a little bit from Grok, a little bit from Claude, a little bit from ChatGPT.
Gotcha.
All of them. I'm trying to just know just enough.
Okay, Jessica, what about you? What's your level of exposure, and how much do you use it and incorporate it into your daily work and life?
I was on a Zoom meeting when I first was introduced to AI when it first came out. And I was like, what in the world is going on? And the person that introduced me was a tech person who knows coding, who knows all that. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like something you would like. And he was like, no, but you can use it too. Like they've made it user friendly where anyone can use it. So I do remember my first time, it was not, you couldn't even create an account. You had to like get in an open server and like put your prompt in and wait and or get in line basically and wait for it to think and then answer you. I've kind of seen that early startup and then the evolution of it. As far as like a day-to-day use, I do use chat GPT and Gemini for speed of typing. I don't like to use it for thought origination. I like to have my own thoughts and then use it as an assistant type of way to say, okay, here, can you check this for spelling errors? Can you clean this up? I need to convert this in from my journal entry into maybe a blog with optimized for SEO. I need to chop this up into more digestible script formats because I want to make a video on it. So I'm using it primarily in that way from a professional standpoint to use it as an assistant to produce content in multiple formats. But as far as thought origination, I'm super protective of my intellectual process. And I've seen the impact of that diminish people's ability to think on their own as well. So it's kind of a fine line of, and I think we're going to get into that. But for me, I don't want anything giving me ideas. I want to have a thinking partner, so collaborator. I've used it to argue with me. So like, this is how I think about this. Can you give me an opposing view and make me defend my theory? Because sometimes I have really good ideas, but I need to be able to defend that to be able to develop it. So I've used it kind of as a sparring partner in that respect too. I've seen my kids using it and they are mostly for trends, like you had mentioned, like a search engine. They want to look something up instead of using Google, they're using that. Professionally, again, I've gotten booked because they asked ChatGPT for a recommendation and my name came up because it was searching and recommended me as a relative speaker. So I can see the value in it for sure on multiple levels. It just comes down to how are we using it and what are the guardrails for it.
Yeah.
What about you? I know
So
you're
I,
probably going to be the seasoned expert on this because this is like right up your alley.
yeah, I don't know about seasoned expert because I actually had lunch. There's a pretty powerful panel here where I'm staying right now of a bunch of kind of tech leaders on the cutting edge of the leading edge, I guess, of AI. And I sat in on this panel a couple of weeks ago, and I had lunch with this developer on Monday. And what I mentioned to him, and I'll say here, is just the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, which is so much as it relates to life in general. But I'd say I jumped in around the same time you did, Jessica, but was just super dabbling, maybe even less than you. And then I think where I really got heavily in it was maybe just a little over a year ago, probably a year ago, January. And then leading up, and then once I decided I was going to be traveling, and since I've been traveling, I've used it for just about everything. Travel logistics, studying cultural norms, language translation in real time. Like I build myself language models before I go into a country, and I've used it for dating advice. I've used it for business, everything. I mean, just to see what it's just for curiosity's sake. And then I also did a couple of brief courses, one with a lawyer friend that Mark and I know for a few weeks before I left, and then a Canadian contact that I have as well that is on the leading edge, I guess, of AI, just to kind of understand some of these philosophical uses, like you said. And then I've been trying to comb the internet and watch all the podcasts and YouTubes that I can. There's a lot of really interesting, divisive conversations going on about this whole thing. So all that to say, I'm pretty immersed in it, but like what you said, and there's already science coming out about this, that you really need to use it as a collab. Well, I shouldn't tell people what they need to do. There are ways to use it that improve or at least help you maintain your cognitive abilities and your creative abilities and things. And then there's ways, if you lean too much into it, it can actually diminish those abilities. You know, if you let the technology do the thinking for you, right? So that's where I'm at. I'm in there pretty deep all day, every day, but also trying to constantly find the balance. So where do we begin? You know, one place we could start. Go ahead.
I just need to say that AI didn't tell me to. So you two keep talking while I plug it in.
Okay, sounds good.
Talk amongst yourselves. This should just take a second, and you don't need to see me anyway. Go ahead.
All right, all right. Well, I don't know, Jessica. Should we start with how well do you want your AI to know you? Should we start with kids and education? So many directions we could go here.
You know, I think it's actually timely that Mark said, hey, I didn't get a reminder. How well do you want AI to know you, right? Like, do you want it to manage your day for you? How much information are you giving it? One thing that I've found fascinating as I've explored it and expanded it is that how much AI we probably use, or I know we use, that doesn't look like ChatGPT or Gemini, right? Or Claude or anything else. All the automations that run, all the things that you are able to drag and drop things now, all of these things have back systems that have been using AI for a very, very long time to study before it became public facing. I know a lot of our social media platforms have been using AI for a very, very long time to study human behavior and to adjust algorithms based on that. So, I mean, how well do you want it to know you? I'm pretty sure it knows you more than you know yourself. You just think you're in control of how much you give it. I mean, that's kind of my 2 cents on it. What do you
Yeah,
think?
this is a really great point. And apparently also a lot of the content that we get, you know, if you think about bots and things like that, it's so ubiquitous, and I think we are exposed to it. I read one statistic that, you know, up to 70-80% of the content that's on driving social media and things like that is AI generated. So we're already swimming in it. We're immersed in it. How well should it know you? That's a great question. And that's one that I ponder constantly, because there's an argument for it knows a lot already, right? And if you really want a true collaborative partner in the technology, then you can upload more information. You know, for example, I've uploaded information about my genetics, information about my last blood tests, personality tests, things like this, so that when I do argue with it and I do want somebody to give me a different perspective, somebody, wow, isn't that crazy? When I want that perspective, then it's going to know me quite well to know maybe where my blind spots are. And so, but there again, you have to kind of always stay, I try to always kind of stay turned on and be like, my mentally turned on, I mean, so that I have some guidelines or some borders or some fail safes, but I just don't know where those end and, where they begin and end. Right. I think that I know. So,
And to that, what guardrails have you put in place that allow you to say that's too far, or that's replacing human connection now, and I've created a echo chamber of sorts for myself, that I'm in control of the conversation, and I know that it knows that I'm in control of the conversation, therefore I will prompt it to align with what I'd like to hear versus what I need to hear?
yeah, that's a great question. So, kind of for me, I try to be consciously aware of my conversations and interactions with the technology. So, at any given time throughout the day, I will stop and basically stop and say, are you placating me, or I don't want you, don't tell me what you think I want to hear, tell me what, use
Mm-hmm.
factual information. And as prompting is such a big deal, because like if I ask you about how to write a book, you might give me a one paragraph answer, but if I say, hey, I need to start with an intro, how do I, the way that I prompt you to answer that is going to be a lot more specific. And so each step of the way, I'm trying to learn and figure out better ways to prompt, which in an attempt to also help me not be biased. And sometimes I will even say, am I being biased here? And it's super gray.
Yeah, because so how do you feel about taking a conversation and putting it into Chat GPT and having it analyze a conversation so you can have a more strategic response to someone?
Can you give me an example?
Do
Like
you want an
what?
example?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Why not?
So we've had some little conversations in our group and we've had misunderstandings. And I know part of your strategy was to put that into ChatGPT to see who was right and who was wrong.
Right.
So do you think that that's outsourcing conflict resolution instead of having human to human conversation and moving towards that? Or is there a need to be proven right, or to use a referee of sorts that's going to take sides or create an illusion of accuracy that doesn't exist and doesn't need to exist? And is it outsourcing the human interaction to the point that people are now going to just look for the angle so they can win, versus living in that I agree to disagree with you human connection that we had prior to Chat GPT and things like that?
Yeah, this is a really great point. So when I've done this with different interactions that maybe we're professional, I know where my strengths and weaknesses are. And especially depending on any number of mental, emotional, physiological baseline that I'm feeling that day, I can have a tendency to overreact or underreact, right? So the way I've handled it in a couple of interactions with business is to put the information in, hey, here's the deal, here's the conversation, how the conversation has gone. I need you to give me factual return on how this got from point A to point B. And then don't take my side, don't be biased, and tell me if I say this, how is that going to be perceived? And oftentimes the reply is, it's pointing out my weaknesses, like you're overreacting, you're being biased, you're not right about this, or factually you may be correct, but the way you presented it was incorrect and could be misconstrued or misunderstood from the two people you're speaking with. And so it mirrors back to me ways that I can level up and improve personally in those situations.
But does that diminish? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, we might want this to be a break, but my computer's showing me that it's trying to reconnect. I wasn't even sure if you guys knew I was here. So if we're good,
We're good.
We're
keep
good.
going. Keep
Yeah, I
going.
think you
Finish
should
your
go,
thought.
brother.
Finish
Yeah,
your
yeah.
thought.
Just I have this part of me, and it's only because we're all three talking, but I have this part of me that's very concerned about replacing human connection and the decision to just trust the person you're in the relationship with versus outsourcing the authority. Because before we had any of that, you would have to go to a person and trust that they were giving you proper feedback. You'd have to make an emotional decision to just trust the relationship or not trust the relationship. And I see this particularly with kids. I see it even professionally. I've gotten text messages where people have clearly put their response into an AI generator, and instead of deleting the first part, they've copy and pasted the whole message, and it says, here's your response in a better way, and then the response, and I feel like this is replacing the rapport and the back and forth volley that sharpens iron, sharpening iron, that requires humans to trust one another, to build relationships, and to get in the weeds with them and use each other to level up rather than outsourcing that growth. Is that valuable perspective? For sure. But I have concerns, from parenting to relationships to marriages that are getting their marriage counseling from chat gpt, putting arguments with their spouses in there, and getting what chat thinks about the relationship. And I just have growing concerns. I don't think there's enough time to talk about that angst that creates in me of outsourcing relationships and authority in growing the human connection. And so I'm going to stop talking and then let you guys. Mark, I want to hear from you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, where are you at so far, brother?
Well, I'm actually perhaps being convinced of something other than what I thought before. This idea that we're relying, we're giving information to a machine, and we're utilizing that machine to distinguish and investigate and sort of delve into our thoughts and to give us answers and to guide us. I'm not sure how different that is from what we do with each other. I mean, whatever, if I was to go to you, Jessica, and say, hey, what's your opinion about blank? Well, the first thing you would do is take into consideration everything you knew about me, which is the information that I've given you. And what I would get back is your perspective on that thing. And I think the only difference between your machine and the AI machine is that it perhaps doesn't have this machine, maybe it doesn't have heart, or it doesn't have soul. And so from an intellectual standpoint, I think it could, AI can be valuable to have a conversation with and to have a relationship with, and to help and guide. But I think if that was all there was, if that was the entire guidance that you relied upon, then yeah, I think that there could be something lost in that. That could be sad for an individual, let alone the world, if that's the direction we end up going. So, as I said, I think I continue to be neutral on this whole thing. I mean, it's happening. Nothing's going to stop it. Nothing's going to stop it. So all we can do is ask ourselves, what is my personal relationship going to be with this? And how much do I want to invest in this relationship, like any other relationship we have? And for me, I need eyes, and I need body language. First and foremost, if my first way of wanting to communicate is face to face. And then second to that, it would be maybe this now. I used to say a phone call, just hearing a voice, but if I can see body language and see a person, it makes a difference. But for me to be typing in and asking questions and waiting for typed back answers or even voice, I just can't see myself going that far.
Yeah, so we're dealing with a really big, super complex thing here, because as somebody that's traveling the world to study human connection and wanting exactly in an ideal world, like you said, Mark, like in person and real conversations, That would be first and foremost. And I find that people are living less and less with each other in person and more speaking through the box, whether that's the computer or the phone or whatever. And so, this can be used. This is an extremely powerful tool that can be used to increase and improve communication potentially, or really diminish it. The skill set of communication, literally getting more atrophied at something that I think humans are already not wonderful at, which is communication. And I think in this we'll maybe parlay into education and what we want to cover with kids and parenting. The way that I utilize it is, you can imagine the very best. If you can imagine it, a psychologist that's the best, that has all the information of all psychology ever written by humans, take all the Ivy League libraries and everything that this technology has access to. But you don't have the human element, which could be strengths and weaknesses. So let's say your psychologist had a terrible day and a terrible morning, and he or she's having a divorce, going through a divorce, but you're there for marriage counseling, right? And so herein lies also the conversation, the complexity of how well do I want my AI to know me? Because if your AI knows, let's say I'm married and my AI knows me extremely well, my strengths and weaknesses, my biases, it knows my wife, which I don't have, all her strengths and weaknesses, biases, and you bring in a third person, let's call it acting as a psychologist, with more information than any single psychologist, but also without the human factor, you might be able to get some really great feedback from just a factual standpoint, a way to navigate, right? But like you said, Mark, there's the intuition, there's the heart, there's the gut-brain axis part of it, there's the micro expressions, and who knows, maybe it'll get to that point as well. So where I'm at with it right now is I'm trying to learn all the potential uses of it, but utilize it as a tool, as a non-being tool, and trying to keep, just through conscious work, trying to keep those lines really clear for myself. And that's hard to do.
I do see so much value in what you said. It's like having an expert in the room with you, but it still comes down to, are you going to weaponize the information, or are you going to, leave it there where it is and then still decide to work it out with your partner or work it out in the room with the people? You could read a book. We could argue that you could read an expert opinion book as well, right? And you could get outside input. Oh, wow, that really stretched my perspective. We're always doing that. I'm not averse to expanding our knowledge base. But for example, when one of the ways that I tried to use AI in the beginning was to write some content for moms, right? And so I had put in something about a particular story. I'd given it some chapters from my book to kind of give it some information. I was looking for some reflective notes, and it was victimizing motherhood in its responses. Okay. So it's kind of like this nobody gets you kind of thing. You're right to feel this way situation. But because I have an outside knowledge and I have an expanded perspective on that, I was able to come back and say, we don't ever give a victimized response to motherhood. This is not a burden that she bears, but a privilege that she can step into. But I don't want to create this narrative that moms are oppressed and misunderstood and this victimhood. I don't want to play into that. Oh, thank you. You're so right. Let me correct that, and I won't do that again. But that's because I could correct it. What about the mom out there that's like put that prompt in to get feedback, and she's told, you're right, you're underappreciated, you deserve better, you should, you deserve to have everything that you want, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise? Like, what happens to her? And that concerns me.
Yeah, that's a great point. And something I think we all need to keep in mind is that at the end of the day, this technology is still being built by imperfect humans with specific motivations, right? So it's so paramount that we all remember that we have to keep our sovereignty in some way, like our thinking, our mental and emotional set point. And I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation. And, unfortunately, it's sort of a race to the finish line with these different technologies in different countries. And there's people that are coming out with big concerns. again, because like you said, Jessica, there's still, even at the base of it, there's some kind of biases still built in, on some level. So when it comes to so a big thing is education and kids, right? I mean, because this is a generation that grew up with technology more than the three of us here on the podcast, probably, right? They were born with a smartphone in their hand, maybe, or at least a computer and some gaming systems, and they were far advanced from what we grew up with. So, what's your take, either of you, on where the role of the parent is and the role of AI within education?
I'll say quite to the point, do not outsource your influence as a parent. So across the board, any kind of AI is going to be amoral, meaning it doesn't have a moral compass because it's designed to meet any morality of the user to be able to be adapted. So it's not going to correct a moral compass for someone unless it's asked to do so. It doesn't have a particular lens in which it's filtering information unless you ask it to. So you can't outsource character development and identity formation to a software. That is the responsibility of the parents to create with their child and to have deep conversations about principles and guide rails and family values. Like that is, you cannot ever outsource the development of your kid's character or their shaping of their identity, because this software is created to support anyone and everyone. And so that's like probably the most important thing. If I could just say one thing to parents about that, is don't outsource that. Treat it just as you would monitor any other kind of social media app, any kind of thing that's collecting data about your child. I would have review the chat history. I would have lots of conversations with your kid about what did they love it for? What did they use AI for today? Make it a normal part of conversation so that you're aware of it, not to control, but to influence the way that they shape it. We've had many situations where trends were happening and they searched up something and it gives a response that is counterproductive to our family growth and development and values. And so we've had great conversations about that. But on the education side of it, we run a really fine line of HIPAA violation, putting kids' information into there, breaking HIPAA. Not a lot of those are not compliant. So we're really working on the education front to find a software that is HIPAA compliant, that we can integrate into the learning process to equip the kids to differentiate, to use it as part of their learning, but also has guardrails set in place. But this is going to be a collaborative effort between parents, schools, and the community at large. It's going to take people, and community and accountability to be able to shape how this thing grows. That's kind of, my two-minute summary on that.
So, how do you think people can, for the vast majority of the population that is only using it as a search engine, and what about the child who doesn't have good parents, and where do you think, as a culture, as a community, we can help educate people across the board in a little more balanced fashion, so maybe the parent has a clue that it's not just like Google. And where does the conversation begin, do you think? Because what you're talking about are some really perfect world scenarios, which are great. But unfortunately, or fortunately, this is coming super fast. And the vast majority of people have no clue how powerful of a tool this is.
That's the concern. That's my deep concern and the problem we're not solving for at the moment. A lot of those types of situations where a child does not have a home environment that's supporting and raising and nurturing and growing them, it is falling on the schools to kind of play that policing role, which is a significant drain on resources. It's underfunded to be able to take on that. So I think always talking about perfect scenarios of collaborations, but you've got churches out there that probably should be having conversations about it. Churches that should be getting involved, community organizations that should be offering seminars. This is a collaborative approach. Awareness is going to be a huge key, and then equipping our community members to help co-regulate how this is taking shape and how it's impacting our communities. But there are going to be people who fall through the cracks, and I think those kids deserve a voice too. And that's probably going to fall on the schools to help shape that as well. Another thing that's been outsourced to education to kind of bridge the gap because parents are not stepping up.
Yeah. Mark, I know you don't have a super strong opinion right now. I mean, well, maybe you do. I know that your opinion boils down to keeping things as human as possible, right? So how, and you have a couple kids and they're grown now and they're on their way, but at some point you're probably going to have grandkids. So I know you've got some skin in this game too on where this whole thing is going to go. What's your opinion on how to balance the human element that we would like to keep alive and well, right? And then what we're talking about here with how it's kind of taking over, whether we want it to or not. It's coming, it's happening, it's already here, right? What are your thoughts so far on this conversation as you've listened in?
That there has there's been a battle, or a conflict with parents parenting, parents engagement, parents involvement, and it's been going on in my lifetime since, I was born in the 60s. And within the 60s, by the time I was in high school in the 80s, there was a lot more. There was mothers going to work, and there was kids left home. And I'm what is that? Was it a latched key kid? What was the term?
Yep,
Mm,
latchkey kids.
That
mm,
that it was kids came home from school, and what they did, nobody knew exactly, but it was either they went out with other kids to play, or they came to each other's houses to play, or they sat in front of a TV. And I remember that was a big deal. Like, our kids are being parented by television. And depending on what that programming was, they're learning to be probably rascally, bad, bratty kids. That was the problem. Like, that parents wanted to blame television for not parenting their kids real well. And it was that way into the 90s, and then all of a sudden there was computers, and now it was social media, and that's how kids were spending their time. And gaming, that's how kids were spending their time. And now it's AI. Like,
Totally.
hmm
I don't know that the argument is about that the issue is the thing. I think that the greater and broader challenge is, do parents want to parent? I know children want to be parented. And in our case, there was always a parent around, if not both of us. Allison and I both worked out of the home all the way through. I always had a home office. And even after Luke went off to kindergarten, up until that point, I was home when both my children, up until they went off to kindergarten. And Allison was there as a violin teacher at the end of the day, so that she was always present. One or both of us were always around. And I'm glad of it. And I think my children would tell you they're glad of it. And so, where do you have the conversations? I think it's at school. I think it's teachers and school counselors being aware, how children are educated. I think in the houses of faith, it should be discussed. And if our society really cares, and if our corporations and big media really cares, then I think that the programming, what's being put out there, should be treated differently. And I think it should be not so casual and callous about, it's up to leaving it then back to the parent to, well, that you should not give them devices, or you should lock down those devices and those other things.
Yeah.
It's all of it. It's all of it. It's a big ecosystem that needs to be changed. That's my opinion.
This is, I spoke with one of my dear friends who's an educator, and I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation, maybe even worthy of some more podcasts, because we've barely scraped the tip of the iceberg on this. And I know we're coming up on time, and I would like to just leave our listeners with a couple of tools or a couple of takeaways on, where to begin this process of maybe implementing or not, incorporating some knowledge, utilizing some of this as knowledge, how to handle it with children. I've got some factual stuff I can drop, but Jessica, do you want to take a swing at this for the parents out there and anyone else that might benefit?
Don't be afraid. It's better the devil you know, so to speak. So we do have to empower ourselves, educate ourselves. We have to keep open conversations. Don't be afraid of having hard conversations, asking questions, doing a little research. There's an old proverb that says, guard your heart, for it's the wellspring of life. Guard yourself, be aware, and have good conversations, guide your kids, that you're their number one influencer. What you do shapes how they see the world, so you want to guide them, not criticize them, and don't ignore things. So we just can't turn a blind eye to it. Ask your teachers, how are they incorporating it in their school and their learning? If you're homeschooling, have a conversation about how we're going to learn about AI. This is about conversations, and guess what? AI can't start a conversation. It can only respond to a conversation. So it's going to need us to initiate the conversation with each other and with AI and learning. So don't let fear guide your decision making.
I love it. And I think that's a good point. I mean, for those of you that are listening to the podcast, I would invite you to just start to do some of your own due diligence and try to use it beyond just a glorified search engine. And, one takeaway is your use of this tool either turns you into a more active thinker or just even more passive consumer. The risk is that and we're faced with this with so much convenience now, but on so many levels, but thinking less, struggling less, creating less independently is not necessarily a good thing. Like, we still need to be doing our own thinking and our own feeling and using this thing as the tool that it is. It's not going anywhere, so the question is not whether we use it, it's how we use it. It's like a gym. It's more, you can use it like a gym, or you can use it, like a wheelchair. So it's up to you. Yeah. Any last thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
What do you got, Mark? What's your tip?
Yeah, it's better to have some knowledge of it and not be ignorant, not ignore it. Ignorance is not necessarily bliss. And if you want to know what your children, your grandchildren, or even you are up against, if you've still got breath in you, it's evolving and changing today. It's just worthwhile to spend some time with it. Just learn what you can, decide if it's interesting to you, and then you can dive deep. But know something, have some basis.
Well, that's it for us. If you heard, Thanks for listening to Big Ideas podcast about people, perspectives, and the ideas that shape who we're becoming. If this episode sparked something for you, stay curious, leave us a comment, and we'll see you next time.